So the first lawsuit, I don't know if it's the first, but there's a lawsuit been filed over a May 30th, 2020 protest in Los Angeles. A protester who apparently was standing in the middle of the street was hit by a foam, some type of a tactical projectile that's supposed to disperse a crowd. Must have bounced or something, hit him in the eye and did a lot of damage. So his attorney is suing on the grounds for all this damage and that these type of weapons have to be removed in future protests, and they're suing for unspecified damages. Now there's a lot of ironies going on here. The first irony, I'm just going to point them out quickly here if I can. We have a lot of business owners that suffered all kinds of damage, financial damage, who will never be reimbursed. So the question has to be asked, even if you award him, besides medical, I think the medical has to be covered. I think that ethically should be done. But above and beyond that, it's almost like before you compensate any protester at all for their rights being violated, you would have to make sure every single store owner who suffered damage is compensated first. And if there isn't enough money for both, I think the store owners would have to take precedence, because their store can't move. It is where it is, and all they can do is hope that their store didn't get damaged. And if it did, they should take priority over a protester just getting an extra $500,000 or $1 million because they got hurt while protesting. Okay. Now, there's a couple other. I like to come up with ideas and solutions going forward, and I think in the future, if you want to maintain your rights as a peaceful protester, I think we've reached the point where you've got to wear a shirt, maybe a bright yellow shirt with a big black P on it for peace, and you're a peaceful protester. The police would know that because you publicly proclaimed you're a peaceful protester, that you're not going to give them problems in terms of violence, looting, or causing mayhem that endangers an area. Okay? If you're wearing that shirt but you violate that tenet, then you lose your right to sue, other than if you have medical damages. That would be it. I think that could be an interesting option because it would preserve somebody's freedom of speech, but it would also make them be responsible. Remember, one of the sayings that has come out of all of the protests is, silence is violence. Okay? Well, that rule should apply to the protesters, right? If you're protesting and within your midst of people, there are people branching off and looting and ransacking and causing all kinds of economic destruction, and you just kind of go on your merry way, you're doing what you're accusing others of doing, which is you're being silent about violence around you. So self-identify that you're a peaceful protester and that you're not going to tolerate violence around you, meaning you don't have to stop the violence, you have to break off immediately somewhere else. And if you are protesting and there are people around you who are not wearing the yellow shirt with the big black P on the front and on the back, then, as a matter of fact, why not just have your name on the shirt? What about just that in big visible letters, your own name on your protest shirt? So the police know you're not an idiot, like you're not trying to do something stupid because they're going to get you on tape. Why not do that? Why do you have to be anonymous? Is that right? Is that fair to law enforcement? This gentleman starts explaining about how he was trying to be the peacemaker, how he was going to go and negotiate with the violent people on behalf of the police. All this stuff that maybe in his mind he believed that, but when you hear it, to me, it sounds all crazy and ridiculous. You know, I mean, we don't know what he did for the previous 2 hours. I don't think we do. And if he was truly a peaceful protester, I think it's come to the point now where you got to wear it. You can't just be it. All right? You got to wear it. So you put something on that identifies who you are to the police. So the police know you're not going to be doing stuff illegal because you're right there on camera. They know who you are. And I think that could be something for the future, because as it stands now, to give money to any protester above and beyond their medical damages, while store owners got nothing, have lost their businesses, lost tens of thousands of dollars, that's not ethical. And it brings up one other point about the police, which is, are the police there to stop illegal acts or not? And if somebody tries to get away, what is the police officer's obligation to try and stop that person from getting away? These issues have to be discussed, because taking out George Floyd and a few other very well-known cases, most of the people who get harmed, I believe, were trying to get away. And we need to analyze why they were trying to get away. I think what we'll find is the economic damage they were about to ensue. They probably were going to go back to jail. And that amount of fear makes it worthwhile to them to run away. So what are the police supposed to do? If the police let that person run away and they commit some kind of violent act that harms another, then that person's going to sue the city. Do you see how that works? So we're creating a situation where if you try to get away and you're harmed, and again, I'm not talking about George Floyd. I've got a petition on change.org that should have been murder one. So I'm not talking about George Floyd. But in a lot of other cases, if somebody tries to get away and they're harmed more than what the violation was that they did, and we want to pass a law to stop that, okay, in other words, the officer would have to assess what the charge is. If the charge is below a certain category, you can't pursue them. You have to get them at a later date in another way. Meaning you have their address, you know who they are, maybe you'll send out a mental counselor, whatever, instead of the police. So maybe that's a big change that could happen, okay? But in the meantime, we have a situation where the police are basically damned no matter what they do. If they let somebody go and that person commits harm, that they're going to find a lawyer and sue the city. If the police use the amount of force needed to stop that person and then it escalates and it causes much more damage than should have ever happened, but it was caused by the person resisting arrest, then we're going to have protests. So we got to really figure this out. So I'm going to play the clip now and listen, because it's like, oh, poor woe is me, but they're claiming there was no violence going on, or he didn't do any. Right around him, there's all kinds of violence going on. If he'd been wearing a shirt with his name on it, maybe with a big P on it as well, one or the other, or both, identifying who he is. Maybe you even register as a peaceful protester, and you just have your uniform you wear, and the police can instantly verify that you're you. Something. Maybe you just get a protesting license, like an ID that you're a protester, and something so that the police know they can identify you for a later date without having to contain you in a way that might be considered too violent. So there definitely needs to be a restructuring of the police force to some degree. But can we be giving out millions to protesters who were around an area where others were causing looting and violence and mayhem and economic damage to store owners? Can they jump the line and get compensated first? I'm hoping there's a judge out there who will say, no matter who sues, other than medical damage, other than being reimbursed for your medical injuries, the store owners have to come first out of whatever funding there is available to pay off damages. Now I'm going to play the story.
A 24-year-old man was hit and knocked out during a protest in the Fairfax district earlier this year. It was all caught on camera, and now he's suing the LAPD. These clashes followed peaceful demonstrations against police brutality back on May 30th. This slowed-down video shows CJ Montano getting hit in the head with a hard foam projectile and falling to the ground. Nearby protesters then managed to pull him away. The LAPD says officers used tactical rounds to disperse protesters who were throwing rocks and bottles. But Montano says he wasn't causing trouble. Instead, he was trying to be the peacemaker.
So I started talking to him. I was like, I'll go talk to the protesters throwing stuff. If you guys stop shooting us, I felt like I was actually gonna die. The vision in my left eye went out entirely.
Montano's attorney says her client posed no threat and the video clearly shows him with his hands up. He is suing the LAPD for unspecified damages, and he's pushing to end the use of tactical rounds in First Amendment demonstrations.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of that sounds good and everything about the tactical rounds that actually can hurt people, but I don't know. I honestly, my own personal opinion, it's just my opinion. I mean, I'm glad he found an attorney to pursue this, because that's probably a good thing, because attorneys are hard to find, and they'll only go out there for you if they can make money. That's the sad part. That gets another beef of mine about how the whole legal system works. But again, yeah, I think we need to create, I mean, the ACLU, the LAPD, City Hall, business owners, and taxpayers. Those 5 groups, that was 5, need to get together and start discussing parameters for protesting. Because you may have the right to protest, but using the credo of the protesters, silence is violence. If you're in an area where violence is happening and the protesters are moving with you, the violent ones, and then breaking off and committing violence, you're actually causing the violence. So you either have to stop those protesters, or you have to just stop in your tracks and tell them to get out of there or separate, or wear clothing in such a way that you're part of a group that's there to peacefully protest. I think in a way the protesters have to bear some of the responsibility, because they didn't march all with a certain kind of wardrobe that promoted peaceful protesting. They just marched. And that's sloppy. The LAPD doesn't do that. They train their officers for like 6 to 9 months before and they don't all pass. But the idea that protesters can just suddenly jump out into the street and become a protester with no protocol, no education, no sense of responsibility, other than that they have their message they want everyone to hear, that they cannot be an accessory to violence by allowing the violent protesters to move among their group, because that's what was going on. I heard it on the news while the protests were going on. They were reporting there were people mixing in with the protesting groups, and then every now and then breaking off and destroying buildings and looting. So you can't keep all your rights if you're allowing people to move with you and cause violence and damage. So that's just what it comes down to. So I would just have to say, whatever judgments, I hope the city will fight back and say, look, we can't compensate people that did not separate themselves from the looters unless we first compensate all the store owners to every last dollar, and that has to happen first, and there's not going to be any money left over after that, other than for medical damages.